I be here. So welcome, everybody. Delighted that you're here. Looking forward to what unfolds in this coming year and the next and the next and the next and the next as eternity unfolds before us. And one of the things we've talked about when we've gone into the codependence work is the pseudo-solutions of the non-being mind. And we've talked about the number one pseudo-solution being if I could just figure this out. And I was processing yesterday with a man who's a pretty successful physician, makes a lot of money. And one of his statements was that because of what he's doing and the alternative types of medicine he's practicing and the difference he's making in people's lives and how cool he is. And his words were, I'm becoming a doc that's a sex symbol in social media. And I'm realizing that this one isn't in the codependence workshop, so it'll be in there the next time I do it. But the struggle that he's been through to produce that status, knowing him and the processing that I've done with him, underlying his drive to achieve that posture, that position, or that image is the power person dynamics that were fed to him of worthlessness. So driven by unconscious worthlessness, a belief he holds about himself, he's stressing and straining and striving to become this something in the world. And I haven't quite gotten to the point where I'm going to present this to him yet because I think he's going to be pretty disturbed by it. But somebody who holds that underlying power person message that you're worthless could really achieve, could be Times Man of the Year, this magazine's the sexiest man on earth, Scientific America, brightest scientist in the world on the cover. And none of that will correct what's underlying the drive to get there. And all of the effort, all of the energy, all of the money being spent is a reaction to this unconscious, not that he couldn't do all that stuff anyway. I mean, if he were doing that, it'd be wonderful. Go for it. Be the sexiest man of the year. Be the scientist of the year. Be the doctor of the year. Be the sex symbol of the year. Be the man of the year. Great. Out of being, because that's who you are. But tricking oneself into believing that all that achievement out there will do one scintilla of work on changing the underlying power person message is futile. I was processing with someone the other day around the responsibility communication work. And most people don't want to face what's inside of them. Most people don't want to deal with what's inside of them, which is called healing. That's why we have a huge drug problem in our country, both legal and illegal. Virtually everybody's trying to get away from something. Everybody's trying to hide something from themselves. And here's where all your drive to fentanyl and everything else comes from. Here's where all the antidepressants and all the antipsychotics, all that stuff, that's all that's doing is trying to escape something that's going on inside. And the way we word that in the responsibility communication process is that what you want to do first, like your first order of business, is to do your healing work, where somebody's doing responsibility communication around what they perceive to be a problem, quote unquote, and virtually everybody is addicted to problem solving. If I could just solve this problem, that's probably the number 2 pseudo solution. If I could just solve this problem, then everything would be okay. And the person who was doing the responsibility communication process, of course the problem's out there, and the whole conversation was about how they did this and they did that, and they're like this and they're like that, and they enraged me, and they. And so we talked about responsibility communication, and the fact that reality is a construct of your mind, and what you want to use your words for is to describe the content of your mind, reflecting that you're responsible for it. And I said I'd be happy to give feedback. There's somebody I've been working with privately. I'd be happy to give feedback if you write it and send it to me. And my response when I got it was, what a great projection communication. This is going to be such a foundation for learning how to move into responsibility communication. And the whole goal of the effort was to change her, the object of attention, the person who was the problem, the person who was vicious and unkind and demeaning and egotistical. The whole thrust of the communication was to change them, to solve that problem. And, I've heard some of the interactions with this person, firsthand, and I can see that it's a big issue. And that person clearly is in destructive mode. But if you're the one that's in disturbance and you think your disturbance is about what they're doing, then you're in denial. Clearly, this person, again, having witnessed some firsthand communication, this person really has some deep work to do to move out of their projections. But their projection isn't my problem. My problem is what's going on in me. And when we talk about responsibility communication, I point out that the purpose of communication, and most people you will rarely in the world hear people use words for the purpose of communication. What most people use words for are to solve problems, to get their way, to get what they want, to achieve what it is they want to achieve. And that isn't communication. In that particular workshop, I define communication as the realization that I have a structure, a construct in my mind that I call my reality. And what I'm attempting to do is to get my reality into your mind intact. Now, you'll remember we've defined a word as a tool of communication. And, in the workshop, I put that out. Is that a reasonable definition for everybody? Well, so it was, yeah, that's a good definition. So then, when words are being used, it's an indicator that there's an interaction happening between two or more people. Is that a reasonable conclusion? Everybody agrees? Yeah, I'm speaking to you, I'm using words, you're speaking to me, you're using words. So it's an indication that there are two of us involved. So then, I point out in the workshop, if you stop for a moment and just observe your mind, you'll notice there are words running in there. And those words aren't being spoken. They're not being communicated with anybody outside of you. So if words are tools of communication indicative of an interaction between two, who's in there with you? Who's communicating with who in that case? In the context of our conversation about AI, Artificial intelligence in you is communicating with original intelligence when words are running in your head and they're not being spoken to anybody else. And artificial intelligence is always trying to tell you what to do. Your past, your what people have called your programming, but literally the content of carbon-based memory, generational patterns, wants to tell you the meaning of this, 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 and this. And if there's actually going to be an actual beneficial healing exchange between two people, one or the other is going to have to recognize that they have a construct in their mind, a reality, and if they can successfully place that reality intact. Now, the minute that, and most people, we've talked about it before, most everybody is a card-carrying member by the age of 4 of the one world universal religion of blame. And if you utilize words to try to convince somebody else that they're the problem in your life, you are going to arouse their who's in there with them. And if you arouse their who's in there with them, what chance do you suppose there is that you're going to be able to get your reality into their mind intact? It's just about nil. So projection communication is a situation where I have a reality in my mind, and I'm going to do my best to use my words to prove that my reality is caused by you and it's your fault, and if you'd change, everything would be better. That's called projection communication. Like, I'm pretending that you're the one who placed this in my mind. It's like, duh. Responsibility communication, I'm going to use words to describe the construct in my mind in a way that reflects that I'm aware that it's in my mind and belongs to me and nobody else. And if, without arousing your who's in there with you, if I can get this reality into your mind intact, then we're going to have the beginning of real, actual, honest-to-God communication. And that's where healing happens. So the simplest form of responsibility communication looks like, the simplest form of projection communication, well, you did that and that really made me mad. Simplest form of responsibility communication in this situation is, well, you did thus and so, and what that brought up in me is a part of my mind that I realize is holding some anger. Now I've communicated that same thing, I've got this anger going on me, but in one case it's all your fault, in the other case I realize it's my responsibility and it belongs to me, and the reason I'm experiencing this is because it's inside of me. And I can only forgive what's inside of me if I can access it. And I can't access it while I'm pretending that it's caused by you. It's just impossible. So when you utilize responsibility communication, use your words to reflect that you know that what's going on in your mind is yours, and that you'd like to bring that reality intact into another person's mind. Once that other person gets what your reality is, as opposed to reacting to your blaming them, in, I don't know, over 25 or so years of working with people and doing the responsibility communication on a one-to-one basis, working with two people with it, at least 99% of the time, no matter how hostile that person has been in the past, when you actually own what's going on in your mind and you realize there's healing that's needed, you'll have a person who'll step up to support you. I really believe that most human beings are just loaded and filled with goodwill, but they've been convinced to be members of this one world universal religion of blame, and they're convinced that they have to blame themselves, or protect themselves from everybody else that wants to blame them, that when you start using projection language, or when you did this, you made me so mad, and when you did that, you hurt my feelings, and when you did that, it did this, and you destroyed it, and when you start using that projection language, people aren't going to respond very well, because they know they're blamers, and they know what blame means. Even though they're not cognizant of it, they know it. So rather than aiming for problem solving in a situation, oftentimes a big issue comes up between people. There are a lot of facets to it, and sooner or later there's a problem there to be solved. And again, that's what almost everybody's mind is addicted to solving the problem. But what's more important is healing. Do the healing work first. Step into responsibility communication. Do the healing work. And then, if there's still something to be done about the problem, solve it. But if you put the cart before the horse, you're guaranteed, by putting the cart before the horse, the problem solving before the healing, that you are going to be also an example of the title of my book. Why is this happening to me again? Because until you allow yourself to become conscious of the part of you that holds pain, that other people are bouncing off of and resonating for you, that you're blaming them for, but you've been through that painful reality 87 different times with 42 different people. Healing. Healing requires responsibility. And once you tell the truth, rather than have to make up stories to pretend that everybody else is the problem in your life, and just take a look in the media at some of the stuff that's going on politically and in the celebrity world. Just look at how many conversations are going on where somebody's trying to make somebody else responsible for what's going on in their lives. The victim game. Responsibility communication just moves into a whole different realm. So that's a powerful tool that we use, and there is a worksheet on the website. If you go to whyagain.org and you look under other worksheets. Actually, Jeanie, do you know just how one would get to the responsibility communication worksheet?
Yes, if they, and I'm going to the website as we speak, so I give the right directions. All right, so if you go to whyagain.org, and in the upper left corner, there's a Start Here button. And if you click on that, then you can scroll down on the Start Here, and there is a section, the first ones are like some videos and things, and then the stress reality management, and then the special instructions, and then right below that it says other worksheets, commitments, and posters besides the reality management. And then if you scroll down, there is a section that says responsibility communication rules. And I will actually, and then there's 3 examples that we give of different ones. So I will put that in the notes for today too. So they could actually just click on responsibility communication in the notes for today, and it will take them directly to that form. And I'll put the examples in there as well. But that's where they'll find it.
Cool. Awesome.
And I did refresh.
Oh, go ahead, sweetie.
I refreshed my switchboard, so you did show up. And actually there was a hand up also, but then it disappeared, so I'm not sure if they still want to talk or not. If you do, press 1 again.
Well, maybe they thought we were ignoring them.
They may have, but everybody's showing up on the switchboard now. And so if you were the one that had your hand up, press 1 again, and it'll put you right up there.
Be delighted to have a conversation. And if there's no hand up.
And it just went back up. And I believe that it is
Awesome.
Peter, area code 619. You're on the air.
Welcome,
good morning,
sir.
Jeanie and Michael.
Hey, good morning. How are you, sir?
Doing great. I was interested in Jeanie's story of working with people, being the quiet, guiding voice as they went through all the noise. I thought that was a great example. And she said if you don't know where you're starting from, and you don't know where you are, it's going to be hard to get over there, where you want to go, and kind of clear that mess out. So I was just going to relate it to an aviation pilot story, two stories. Korean Airline 007 misprogrammed their computers of where they started, and the gyroscopes thought they were on course the entire route, but they were several miles off, and they flew into Russian airspace, actually Soviet, I think it was then, and they got shot down, passenger airliner. And then I knew somebody in my airline who was in the Caribbean on the island and programmed the wrong island. So they flew back off course the entire way until the land-based systems could update the navigation, which they do. But that's 20 years ago. In today's world, the satellite's updated. But I just thought there was an analogy there.
Michael, you're talking, but you're not coming through the phone. Well, I'll just add to that too, Peter, that there's no punishment for making a wrong choice or not following direction, but there are consequences for the choice that you do make.
Yeah, sure. And in my book, I always wrote, you got to know where you're starting from. That's kind of where I was leaning. But
Absolutely.
And
that applies in the mental, emotional realm just as urgently as in the physical. If I think I'm in this wonderful, the puffed up, I'm wonderful and everything, and I know everything, and the truth is I've got some blind spots and some ignorance going on, I'm going to be in just as much, metaphorically, I'm going to be in just as much danger as the pilot who thinks he's flying into, Europe and ends up in Russian airspace. Exactly. And there's some pretty severe consequences. Yeah.
So obviously they've added technology to prevent that from happening, because you don't see a lot of that today. But
right.
Yeah, that was the first chapter in my first book. Was we don't know what we don't know.
True. And fortunately, we're learning it, right?
Yes. With teachers like you, a lot of us are learning a lot quicker than it would have otherwise.
Well, delighted that I can shorten your learning curve with having spent the last 50-plus years developing an understanding of it and hopefully presenting it in a way people can relate to and quickly make use of it. To me, that's the whole vision of this work, is to make it available in a way that people can quickly make use of it.
Well, I think it's great, and I just wanted to say thank you. And Jeanie, I loved your story of how you demonstrate that with your women's group.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
Cool. It applies to listening to the still small voice for sure. And it's interesting that there are people who have learned that if they can create enough noise and distraction, people will never hear the truth. And that's what a lot of what's going on in the political world today is. People are just creating so much distraction. That's one of the pseudo solutions of the non-being mind, is to obfuscate, to distract, confuse, switch issues. You'll hear people who do you did it too. It's like, okay, you know what? You're right, I did it too. But what we're talking right now is when you did it. So how about if we finish cleaning this up, and then let's process what I did, and I'll clean that up. But there are all kinds of ways to obfuscate. Actually, let me just quickly, I just happen to have a list here of the dozen top pseudo solutions. I just made a note that we're going to put problem solving as one of them. But What are the pseudo-solutions that are reflective of states of the non-being mind? One, again, if I could just figure this out, what, why, how did this happen? Two, fight. Winning becomes most important. If I could just beat them, then everything would be okay. All of this is a way to avoid healing. Forgive them or myself. I'll just let them off the hook. I'll just let myself off the hook. Fix them. Actually, they're non-being states that go with each of these. Let me go back and throw in the non-being states too, because I think it adds a little bit of a dimension to it. So someone who's stuck in figuring it out gives up their human life to become a non-human thinking. Someone who thinks fighting is the way to win and that winning is most important, if you could just beat somebody else, they give up their human lives to become non-human judgings. Someone who plays the game of pseudo-solution, I'm going to forgive them or myself, ends up giving up their human lives to become a non-human fixing, a non-human doing, a non-human pleasing. The next pseudo-solution, if I could just fix them or myself, which really means if only I were good enough or if only they were good enough. And that person gives up their human life to become a non-human pressuring. The next pseudo-solution that I've identified is if I could just find somebody to love or someone to love me. That is, if I could just find somebody to approve of me or somebody that I could approve of. That person then condemns themselves in giving up their human lives to become a non-human faking. Number 6 pseudo-solution is if I could just control everything and everyone. And they give up their human lives, love, to become a non-human controlling. The next one is to strain and struggle to make up for a non-being life. And that person is looking for validation rather than healing the part of them that has been invalidated. So they give up their human lives to become a non-human having, a non-human getting. This is one that kind of fits with what I'd spoken about in the early part of the show. Number 8 pseudo-solution, if I can just put my pain deeply enough into my brain's image of you, that is, blame you accurately enough, and convince myself that they're the problem in my life, then that pseudo-solution leads one to becoming a non-human blaming. And if you look at these, when you look at the state that one's in, you can kind of reason backward. Oh, if I'm always blaming, what have I done? Oh, I'm trying to make up for a non-being life. Or I'm trying to convince myself that somebody else is the problem. Another of the pseudo-solutions is I'm just going to take the easy way. I'm going to stay on autopilot, do all the behaviors that were done in the past, even though I hated it when they were done with me. I'll just do it to my children. My power person did it to me, so I'll just pass it on. That person becomes a non-human suffering and a non-human victim, or a non-human inflicting pain. The next pseudo-solution is if I could just be right. If everybody would just know that I was right, this person never suspects self and can prove it in a heartbeat they're not responsible. So that person gives up their human lives to become a non-human convincing. And then the one we talked about at the beginning of this part of the conversation, to obfuscate, to distract, to confuse, to switch issues. And that person gives up their human lives to become a non-human confusing. And the 12th one on the list is to leave, escape, pretend, withdraw, hide emotions, I'm not angry or afraid. You'll hear people all the time proclaiming what they're not. And by proclaiming what they're not, they're telling you exactly what they are, because our words always come from what's resonating and moving within us. So this person finds it easy to get rid of others or write them off. These are people who do not live in relationships with another being as a being. They live as a body in relationship to another body. So they have relationships with bodies. And of course, when the bodies measure up, that person's great. If the body stops measuring up, then that person all of a sudden gets thrown out. And that person becomes a non-human escaping or a non-human leaving. So they're the pseudo-solutions of the non-being mind, to which, thank you, we just added another one. Got another little piece of the puzzle. Thanks for the questions. How's that resonate for you, Peter? You still with us, Peter?
He actually dropped.
Okay, shall we give him a second to see if he comes back in? Cool. And or if you're out there in listener land, if that list resonates anything for you to share or any questions, then push 1. And remember that healing is much more important than problem solving. If you're on one of those stations where we can't see you in our control panel and you do have a question or thought for us, the call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you'll be listening to the show directly. And then if you push 1, that'll raise your hand in the control panel, and we'll be able to have a conversation. Peter find his way back?
No, he's not.
Okay.
And I was just
then
looking, we also created a page, I thought, on pseudo solutions. So I'm looking for that link, and I'll put that out there as well.
Cool. Sweet.
Yep, we did. So I'll put that link, the pseudo solutions, on the notes for today.
Cool. Awesome. So I was going to move into, seeing as we talked so much about responsibility communication, I was going to kind of go over the latest responsibility communication sheet. For 25 years, this sheet was a one-page set of instructions for how to use responsibility communication. And thank you to Miss Magda, who way back years ago, this was her favorite tool when she came to Heartland on the support team, and she really loved to use it. And then when we did this in the online codependence to interdependence communication practicum, she and Chuck chose to be the subjects of it, and her brilliant, inquisitive mind just opened a whole different space, changed that whole workshop, and the communication instruction set went from one page to 3 pages, or from 1 page to 3 pages, as a result of her inquiry and willingness to go for it. So, if you happen to be on the line, Magda, thank you. Happy New Year. Appreciate you. That was an awesome piece of work that you did. It extended our intensive. We were doing a Zoom codependence to interdependence communication intensive, and it actually extended that by about 3 weeks between that and the Power Person worksheet that I just went over. It was a really deep, deep intensive. But it is the intensive, by the way, if you want to do a self-study that includes 90 hours, that's 90 hours of video with all of the teaching, all of the questions and answers, all of the processing of that. And anybody that happens to be on the show at this moment that was in that intensive, I'd invite you to go back and review the workshop, and I promise it will have a whole other meaning by going through that material again. So I'm just going to kind of read and make comment on that sheet. So first thought on the sheet is that everything linked to fear and or hostility is based in corrupt data, and it's a fraud. Corrupt data defiles the mind and the self. Until we must end our acceptance and addiction to the lies and restore the mind with the ability to honor and perceive the truth, which in turn uncovers the awareness of ourselves as eternal love. Unconscious thought disorders, which are the root of all pain, disease, lack, and suffering, are dissolved when they're admitted into a mind where love is conscious, active, and present. When the two meet, if you can hold, this is one of the practices. That's why I often say, take time every day to cultivate your relationship with active, present love. And then if some situation comes along that resonates some part of you that you haven't dealt with, that thought disorder, when exposed to active present love, will automatically dissolve. That's the core of all healing. So each word and behavior expressed and impacting an energy field is a frequency that is vibratory in nature. In a sense, each is an extension or a reflection, an actual energetic appendage of a thought which most profoundly alters the field. So the idea here is to recognize that my words are frequencies, that actually my words are frequencies reflective of frequencies of thought, and those frequencies impact my body. And I always get the original. If that thought seems to be about somebody else, they get a carbon copy. They may not be home for delivery, but I always get the original. So each energy that we engage in alters the field, and it's expressed from or through a word, a thought, and each reflects conscious or unconscious, flip sides of the same coin. It's like you can't have one without the other. The idea here being, if I speak a word of, let's say, hostility, I can't speak that word of hostility without having the chemistry of hostility in my body. It's like that old song, love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage. A thought of hostility or fear produces chemistry corresponding to the hostility and fear. You can't have one without the other. You can't separate the mind from the body. They're one and the same. Just checking, Jeanie, is Peter back?
No, he's not.
Was he able to get back on?
No, he's not back on.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So only disintegrative energies introduced as thought but reflected as words and held within the human system can create the distortions that we call disease, suffering, and death. Nothing else can cause disease, suffering, and death within your structure. And in the ability to own, correctly see, understand, and change my thoughts, and therefore my language and behavior, continuously produces an organizing, break that word down, organizing activity. So it's what turns into organic structure in my mind energy system, in the fields of others it resonates with. And in my words lies the power of life and death, literally. My human energy system has a mechanism called emotions, and these reflections of thoughts entering the cell create what we call, quote-unquote, chemistry. And they are designed to inform me of the quality and impact on my physiology of my thoughts, my words, the patterns that I entertain or use. So the words I use are going to reflect, when they hit a cell, that energy is going to inform me of the quality of my thought. My emotions are strictly internal, caused by and tell me nothing about the external world. They simply inform me whether my thoughts will destroy or uplift me. Pain signals internal destruction. If I have a particular thought that I engage in and I'm in pain, my system is warning me that I'm engaging in an energy that's destroying me. So pain is always a signal calling your attention to and informing you about internal destruction. Love and joy signal upliftment. If you've been taught the lie that your emotional issues, your happiness, or your pain are caused by another, you've been taught a system of thought that's absolutely insane. Pointing out that the word sanity means soundness of mind. Joy is not an emotion. It comes for no reason except that love is conscious, active, and present in you. Hostility is not an emotion. Hostility is a drug meant to anesthetize against pain. So joy is not an emotion. Hostility is not an emotion. They're reflections. And I'm just making a note here, so take a second. So the world of perception is purely a product of the mind. The mind converts and organizes its energy patterns literally into pictures, which we've been taught tell us about the world, when in fact they're void of worldly meanings, but fraught with the truth about their source, my mind. If I'm in pain or disturbance, especially if I'm blaming another, there is much that I and my generations have hidden from ourselves and lied about. The sole purpose of responsibility communication is to learn about myself and what I've hidden in my mind. And I was sharing with you, I was processing with someone the other day around this worksheet. I delivered it to them and was supporting them in using it in a private session. And they kept going to, but how's that going to get her to change? Well, but how is that? Well, what if I send it and they don't respond? It's like, this process is an internal process meant for you. Yes, it will have an impact on the outer world, and if you do it with full responsibility, it will, again, 99.999% of the time will produce healing. But you're not writing it for them. You're writing this for yourself. You're doing this to take a deep dive into your own mind. So once again, I'm going to just repeat that last thought. If I'm in pain or disturbance, especially if I'm blaming someone else, there's much that I and my generations have hidden from ourselves. Much that I've lied to myself about, pardon me. The purpose of responsibility is to learn about myself, what I've hidden in my mind. I think I see, quote unquote, what is out there, quote unquote, but I'm looking at my own patterned thinking turned into pictures. And again, excuse me for just a second, I'm making a note here. So my words will, what comes out of my mouth automatically will always reflect what's stored in my own carbon-based memory system and is then projected into the false graven images my mind shows me. You know, when you hear that directive, the Creator says, have no false gods or graven images. The graven images are the pictures engraved in our minds of a world of bodies that aren't there, but we think are there, that we believe are there, and they're nothing but constructs of the mind. Those pictures. Nowhere in the world will you find a body. You will find an energy system, yes. If you could see if you could alter the rate of vibration in which your eye receives information, you would see this whirring mass of electrons, protons, neutrons, and light. You would not see a body. The mind generates this image called a body. It exists nowhere in the world. And my emotions tell me what I'm doing to that. And most of the world, language is how somebody else caused their emotions. If there's pain, I've been betrayed by my own words from my own mind, and projected into the pictures of my mind, the content that's painted on the inside of my eyeballs that I call you. Hostility and or fear present in any form defiles perception and indicates my mind is using corrupt data to guide my speaking. Remember that question, who's in there with you? Your power person. When you speak words of hostility and fear under pressure, when under great stress, your power person's voice is speaking through you as though it were your own. Again, keep asking yourself the question, who's in there with me? Language that reflects the presence of conscious active present love is healing language and restores the mind to truth. It takes great learning to turn that one around. And in the Communication Did You Hear What I Think You Said workshop, we lay out 7 steps of responsibility communication. So an event happened, and my perception overrode my experience of that event with a story that was aroused from my carbon-based memory. Most people have a picture engraved in their minds, literally a world painted on the inside of their eyeballs, and they think they're looking out in the world. When you actually utilize responsibility communication, you become responsible for those pictures. All of a sudden you realize that they are reflections of the content of your own mind. Now it takes a big piece of work to move in that direction, to change that game around. So the first step in responsibility communication, and we'll probably just get partway through this, well, actually, I'm going to lay out an example of the process, and that'll probably take up the rest of the show. And then tomorrow we'll go into the 7 steps for responsibility communication. So we tend to attract people into our lives through resonance, people with matching bags of garbage. And we will tend to attract people who most skillfully know how to resonate our deepest hidden pain. So the law of resonance, remember, creates motion toward in the human realm. So if I have pain in me, I'm going to tend to resonate somebody into my space. So when they resonate something that's pained in me that I'm in denial of, my mind will transparently integrate my unresolved pain into my brain's image of them. And then I tell a story about them Or I walk away from the interaction talking about them, and I talk to my friend here and my friend there, and I gossip and I slander and the whole conversation, walking away from that conflict, is about them. You will know you've made great progress when you walk away from a conflicting situation talking about yourself. That's going to be a reflection of great progress. You've had a conflicting situation, and when you go to sit down with your spouse or friend, you start talking about yourself in that situation rather than the other person. So the projection communication story from mind in denial looks like, first of all, it's frustration, it's anger, fueling the mind, holding the breath. Here I was, excited as usual, and ask a question about a project we're discussing. You, as you usually do, rained on my parade. Your negative comment was a put down, as though nothing I say has value, and your regular negativity came in as usual. You make me so angry. So that's the projection communication, quick example. Responsibility communication in the same situation, exactly the same circumstance, will look and sound more like, first of all, while taking a breath and paying attention inside, listening deeply within, moving past the anger that's been aroused, past the pain that's been aroused, it's going to sound more like, when you said what you just said, I stopped for a moment and realized that an old issue of being put down really came up in me. I realized my dad always had a comment that indicated he was displeased with me, and no matter what, he would never be happy with me. I realized that I have a lot of old hurt to own and heal. Would you take a breath with me and hold the space of love? I need it. So there's a quick example of the difference between projection communication and responsibility communication. And there are 7 very effective steps to follow. And we'll start tomorrow's show out with those 7 steps and look at responsibility communication. And if any questions come up for you, we'd be delighted to hear from you and talk about it. So thanks for joining us. I hope your day is awesome and that this new year is the best one yet of your eternal life.